Hannah Thomas, and I am excited to be here today. I'm a part of the worship team here at Metro, and I'm really excited that you've joined us for the Academy of Worship here at Metro. I am also excited to be able to share with you about the topic of worship leader as a worshiper. So to start off with, let's just think about a leader, what a leader is, right? When you think of a leader, you think of someone with integrity. You think of someone who is proactive, who has high expectations for themselves and the people that they're leading. But one of the things that sticks out to me as many leaders that I've followed, but a leader that influences others is someone who walks the walk, someone whose actions match their words. They're not just talking, they're not just telling you what to do, but they're doing it too. And so we're gonna focus on the worship leader as a worshiper, but I'm gonna take you on a few tangents, but I promise you it will all connect in the end, okay? So we're gonna start by thinking about swimming. I know it sounds really random, but I personally do not know how to swim. And so I'm gonna ask you to pretend that you don't. Pretend you don't know how to swim. And you decided you're going to learn. Like you've committed, you found a place that does lessons, you went, you paid for the lessons, and then you show up in your swim gear and you're ready. And so the instructor tells you, get in the water, and then walks you through or talks you through the steps, tells you exactly what to do with your arms and what to do with your legs and what to do in terms of breathing and not breathing and the correct way to do things and the incorrect way not to, to make sure that you're not doing, you're learning the actual steps for swimming. So all of that sounds wonderful, but imagine that whole time you got in the pool and you're listening to the instructor and the instructor's standing on the side of the pool talking, right? When you imagine someone teaching you, they're in the water with you. But this instructor's standing on the side outside of the pool and talking you through it. Now, as someone who doesn't know how to swim, that sounds scary to me. At that point, I'd be like, okay, here's your money back. I'm not interested in learning because I need someone who's gonna be in the water with me. Well, you continue that conversation and they know exactly all of the things they need to know about swimming. They got certified. They know every step to take. They've watched videos on swimming. They've taken classes on swimming, and they can talk you through every single part of it. They know what to do, what not to do. But when they go in the water, they've never successfully swam themselves. Now imagine a swim instructor who's never successfully swam trying to teach you how to swim. They may mentally know everything, and they may want to teach you, and they may have that eagerness, but if they've never experienced swimming themselves, they will never fully understand what it takes to teach someone and to really guide them in that process, okay? So that sounds kind of crazy and silly. Why would someone want to be a swim instructor and who doesn't know how to swim? But that's sometimes what we do as worship leaders. We watch phenomenal worship leaders who are leading in different churches. We're inspired by them. We want to do what they're doing. So then we practice individually and we learn the songs and we learn what to say even. We listen and we learn and we read and we do all of the learning we can do. And then we get together, we join a worship team and we get together and we practice together. And we even take the step forward to pray and say, Lord, let your will be done. And all of that sounds wonderful. There's nothing wrong with that. But the problem lies in if we are doing all those steps and our goal is to lead others, but we don't actually spend time worshiping God ourselves on a personal level. And so what does it mean to worship, right? When we spend time personally worshiping, we're celebrating, we're praising, we're glorifying God, we're responding to him. But in order to respond to him, you have to experience him. You have to know who he is, right? We're also at the same time surrendering every part of ourselves. And when we are trying to lead others into worship, we're asking them to do the same thing. We're saying, I want you to put everything in God's hands. All of your troubles, your struggles, your difficulties, your joys, your blessings, right? All of your past, your present, your future, every part of you. We want you to give it to God and completely surrender to him. And we want you to respond to who he is in your life. But again, if you never experience that yourself, how can we teach others? It reminds me of something that I've heard Pastor Ruben say. How can we lead others to a place where we've never been? right? If you think about that, if we never truly experience worship on our own, then how can we lead others into worship? So then you might think, I worship every time I practice with people, every time I'm at service, I'm worshiping. Like my mind is focused on God. And that sounds great, but the problem lies in that a lot of people think worship happens during service. And it's a mistake to think that worship only happens during service. Yes, does worship happen? Is there a time set aside for worship through music, worship through prayer? Yes, absolutely. That happens at service, but that should not be the only time. What needs to happen, what is absolutely missing sometimes, is that the spending of your time daily in worship. And what that means is not just praising and singing and playing instruments and glorifying him, and not just personally surrendering, but also growing in him daily, right? And where does that come from? That comes from spending time in his word. When we worship, again, we respond to who he is to us. But every time we read God's word, he reveals something new. And when he reveals something new to us, then our worship changes. And so that daily worship it adjusts who we are as worshipers. And then that worship, as we grow as worshipers, that affects who we are and how we are in terms of leading others into worship. I apologize. In Matthew 15, 8-9, Jesus quotes Isaiah, and he's talking about the Pharisees and scribes, and he says, "These people draw near to me with their mouth, and they praise me and honor me with their lips, but their heart is far from me, and in vain they worship me." And when we think of Pharisees and scribes, we think there's already a negative connotation to that because they know the word, they know the laws, but they rejected Jesus, right? Like that, it seems like something we would never do, but that's essentially what we're doing as leaders. When we try to come before the church, or we come at practice and then we try to lead others into worship, if we haven't done it ourselves, if we haven't spent that time surrendering completely and really worshiping God for who he is, his greatness, his joy, his love, his mercy, his faithfulness, when we haven't spent that time every single day worshiping and spending that time growing in God, then we're essentially like the Pharisees. We speak and we say it with our mouths and we tell others this is what you need to do, but then we're not really truly understanding because we didn't experience it ourselves. And what we don't want is our worship to be in vain, because God does not want that kind of worship, right? Okay, we're gonna take a totally different perspective just for a minute. I'm gonna read to you a little bit about fire, okay? So fire is the result of applying enough heat to a fuel source when you've got a whole lot of oxygen around. As the atoms in the fuel heat up, they begin to vibrate until they break free of the bonds holding them together, and then they release volatile gases. These gases react with oxygen in the surrounding atmosphere. The chemical reaction causes a lot of heat, so much heat that in fact, it can keep driving the reaction. As long as there's enough fuel and oxygen still present, the reaction will become self-sustaining. And then what we actually see, the flames that we see, are a release of some of that heat energy as light. Without fuel, oxygen, and heat, a fire cannot sustain itself. So it needs fuel, oxygen, and heat to sustain itself. Well, take a minute and think about how worship is like fire, okay? A lot of times we think of worship like the flame of a candle. We imagine God to be the oxygen, right? Like God, we invite God to fill the sanctuary, and he provides the oxygen. And people, they're the fuel, they come in like candles. And then we see ourselves as the heat. As we lead people into worship, we're providing that heat. There's plenty of oxygen, and the candle gets lit, there's a flame, and we're so excited. It sounds wonderful. We are fanning that flame of that candle. But what happens then when our heat is reduced, or when we turn off our heat, or we stop leading? The fire goes out. right? So when we think of worship like a candle, like a flame of a candle, it's not really representing what worship should be. What we need to think of it is like a wildfire. Now, it's different from a wildfire because with wildfires, they can start by accident or they can start randomly. That's not what we want. In terms of thinking of worship like a wildfire, it should be something that's hard to control, okay? And so what happens is, we spend time worshiping God individually on our own as worshipers, as people of God, children of God. We spend time individually growing in Him, reading His Word. And what happens is God is the fire. God is the heat, God is the oxygen, and God is the fuel. He is all three. All we are is the vessel. We hold it. So what happens is God allows us to be filled with fire. He does all the work. We don't have to do anything. We're just responding to who He is. He allows us to be filled. And every single day we spend time in Him and worshiping Him, that fire is fueled and it grows and it grows. Now think of myself. I am an individual vessel that is full of fire. So when I come to church on Sunday to lead others, or even just to sit in church and worship with others, I am already on fire. I don't need to be set on fire. I'm already there. And everyone around me, the worship team who's leading with me, is already on fire because we are all vessels that God has already allowed us to grow each and every day, right? He's fueling that fire every day, and we're growing and growing. When we get together, the point is not to light each other up. The point is for us to become one. This uncontrollable fire that's so overwhelming that when we leave this place, it pours into others. That's the purpose of us worshiping individually and then coming together. And what happens is when you and the people on your team and I and every single person, when we have spent that time individually worshiping, pouring out all we are to God, allowing Him to fill us with that fire, and then we come together, we pour into the people who come to service, right? We then are able to lead them. And if they've come full, awesome. They're gonna be even more full. There's no maximum. If they come empty, because that sometimes people do, and that's okay, that's what church is for, we fill. God allows us to pour into them. And so that's our job, but we can't take them there if we're not already full of fire in the first place. And so the goal in us leading is not just, again, for a temporary, like we're gonna set you on fire. We want you to be filled, and we want you to go out and pour into others, right? From the very beginning of the Bible to the very end, we see people worshiping. And so what's really great about worship is there's no wrong way to do it, and there's no right way to do it. Worship is worship. God, it's you responding to who God is to you, right? We see from the very beginning, we see Abraham worshiping through sacrifice. We see Joshua falling to his face. We see David dancing. We see the woman with the alabaster jar giving her prized possessions. We see Jesus submitting His will to God's will. They're all forms of worship. They're all worshiping in different ways. Even in Revelation, we see the elders falling to the ground and casting their crowns before God and just crying out of the greatness of God. So there's no wrong way to worship. We see all throughout the Bible people worshiping different ways. But the wrong thing is not to worship. We have to spend time each and every day. We need to make sure we are surrendering every part of our lives to Him. We need to make sure we are responding to who He is, but in order to do that, we need to grow in Him every single day. Tom Walker, he is a worship leader, and he's written hundreds of songs. He has led with amazing preachers all throughout the nation. And he said this about worship: when we worship, the invisible God is at work, doing invisible and powerful things. We get realigned and refreshed and refueled. We find unspeakable joy and indescribable peace. We discover the breakthrough strength of God, which enables us to walk in truth, live in his presence, and see him fight our battles for us. It's how we can put the beauty of the gospel on display, receive his many blessings, and at the same time be a blessing to the world. If we don't spend time experiencing that ourselves, then when we go to lead people into worship, we become like that swim instructor who's on the side saying all the right things and knowing everything they need to know, but never truly experiencing and being able to walk people into that. John 4:23 says, "But the hour is coming and is now, when true worshipers will worship in spirit and in truth, for the Father is seeking such to worship him." After you've watched this video, take a few minutes to reflect. Think about your worship. Where is your worship right now? Maybe it's in a phenomenal place. Maybe it's not. And there's nobody saying there's a right way or a wrong way. What you need to do is reflect on your place and where you are with God and what you're doing each and every day. And see what you need to do to ensure that you grow as a worshiper. Because as you grow as a worshiper and as God completely fills you and continues to fill you until overflowing, as he does that, you become a worship leader. And that's, again, why you're here, because you are called to be a leader. So thank you again for joining us today. Thank you for giving me the time to share with you. I look forward to meeting you, and I hope that you just have an amazing experience at the Academy of Worship.